Sami Al-Arian, Director of the Center for Islam and Global Affairs at Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University. Pleasure to have you on, Sami. What's foremost in your mind at the moment?
Well, I guess a lot of relief in Gaza right now, which is great, but we also have to take stock what's taking place here. What's taking place here is that the resistance in its response to Trump took the plan, the 20-point plan of the American president, and split it into two parts. One part, it said that it can negotiate, which has been basically the basis of all negotiations since the very beginning of this two-year genocide. Namely, in exchange for the Israeli captives and hostages, the other side must stop and end the war, which is taking place today, withdraw from the totality of Gaza, that's partially would take place in the next few days, and then the exchange of and release of the hostages captives in exchange for hundreds and thousands of Palestinians in Israeli custody, the resumption of aid in massive way, and that's also happening, as well as eventually the reconstruction and rehabilitation of Gaza. That is the basis of what's going on today. What the resistance in its response told also Trump and the American plan is that the other parts which have to deal with the future of Gaza, Hamas and the other factions cannot on their own make that decision and take part in that negotiations. This is a matter for all the Palestinians, including obviously the PLO and others, to take a collective decision on, because that determines the future of the Palestinians, and they can't on their own make that decision. So that way, remains to be seen whether that will be a deal breaker in the future or whether they can find an accommodation, because the issues of the future of the Palestinians or the imposition of another high commissioner, Tony Blair, a war criminal like they did 100 years ago with Herbert Samuel, that would not be accepted by any Palestinian. So that remains to be seen how that plan will unfold in the near future.
Sami, do you even see this deal taking us to that moment where different Palestinian factions and interests would be able to come together to discuss how they collectively might be able to govern Gaza in the future? Because many people are saying that this deal may have been imposed by Donald Trump on Benjamin Netanyahu, meaning that the Israeli cabinet is likely to want to go back to war, maybe after the hostages are released.
Very possible. I mean, Netanyahu has done it before, at least twice in December 2023 and also in March of this year. He would agree to a certain agreement, he would get hostages back, and then he would resume his genocidal war. This time seems a bit different because Trump is basically staking his reputation on this deal. So if he reneges, it will just be another failure. The Palestinians will go back to a war of attrition. It's going to be a tragedy. It's going to be a disaster. Israel's reputation is already in tatters. Let's also take stock of what's going on here. For 2 years, Israel has failed to accomplish many of its objectives. The so-called achieving absolute and total victory is denied. Forcing Palestinian surrender is denied. Releasing Israeli captives through military means is denied. Engineering mass exile and forced displacement has failed. This plan clearly says the Palestinians will have the right to stay on their own land. And we can see what Israel has actually achieved. If you look at what it has done, it has perpetrated the worst war crimes witnessed in 8 decades, live streamed to the world 24/7, genocide, ethnic cleansing, starvation, war crimes, and so on and so forth. Global condemnation from all the international institutions, UN, ICJ, ICC, Human Rights Council, you name it. The near total diplomatic and popular isolation as a rogue and pariah state. The political and military leaders have already been investigated, indicted, and wanted as war criminals by the ICC. The collapse of the Zionist narrative, especially on social media. And we see a surging global support for Palestinian self-determination and independence. We saw last month, for example, when at the United Nations, over 158, that's over 80% of the countries are already calling for a Palestinian state. So what legacy does that leave the Israelis? It's in tatters. Never again has found now a new reference point, the Israeli Holocaust of Palestinians. Gaza now is mentioned alongside Auschwitz as a concentration camp. Concentration camps no longer then refer only to Nazi Germany, but also to an open-air prison imposed in Gaza. This is the true legacy of this war, of the Zionist movement, of the Zionist regime, one they cannot deny, cannot ignore, and can't escape.
There are two issues that require trust possibly more than others, and those are really military issues, about the occupying forces withdrawing completely, as Hamas insists, and then Hamas itself disarming, which is what Israel insists upon. But when there's such a lack of trust, one almost would have to observe the other party abiding by the deal before itself takes that action that's determined by the agreement. You see what I'm saying is that the lack of trust could literally crumble in a moment. And then, of course, Sami, beyond the practicalities of those two issues is the philosophy of Hamas. You can't defeat a philosophy. Hamas will exist somewhere in the Middle East, and the group has a philosophy that you can't defeat.
Hamas is just the manifestation of Palestinian resistance that has been taking place for over a century. 40, 50 years ago, it was called Fatah. 30, 40 years before that, it was of Qassam in his attempt to drive out the British and the Zionist incursion in Palestine. This will always exist. Whatever they try, they can change the name, but the concept of resistance will endure. You cannot be defeated. You cannot defeat a people's will to gain their self-determination and independence. On the issue of the withdrawal and the issue of what's going to happen in the near future, that is really the sticking point. That is the most crucial point. Trying to disarm the Palestinians is a failure. It's going to be a failure strategy. It cannot be accomplished. There might be some symbolic things, but to bring about what Israel wants, which is the total disarming of Palestinians in Gaza, that will not be achieved, that will not be supported, that would, the resistance fighters would be willing to fight before they get a single arms handed over to the Israelis. I think the most likely scenario is that there will be some sort of an international force that can regulate the use of arms, because Palestinians said what we need our arms for is for self-defense. No one is talking about attacks. And the Hamas and the other factions are proposing a 20 or even more years of truce. There will be no aggression from the Israeli side, and there will be no attacks from the Palestinian side. So whatever it is, the really ball is in Trump's court. He can impose on the Israelis what they haven't been able to accept throughout this ordeal. If he is serious about this, then he can tell the Israelis that these are the terms, these are the red lines. They cannot go back to genocide. They can't go back to mass murder, what they have been doing in the destruction of life and property. And then everything else could fall in place, because the resistance is willing, obviously, to give up governance. They've already said that numerous times. They already have an agreement with the Egyptian side to have some sort of a Palestinian technocratic council or a committee to run Gaza, at least for the near future, before elections are held within a year or two. And then you talk about the withdrawal of Israelis, which must take place. Otherwise, none of that could take place. No one is going to give a dime to the Palestinians for rehabilitation and for reconstruction before a total withdrawal is taken. So Trump would be under tremendous pressure as well. He wants to lead this effort to rehabilitate and reconstruct. That can't be done with Israeli army inside Gaza. Right now, today, or within the next few days, Israel withdraw from approximately 50% of Gaza, at least from the sides where you have most of Gazans are being concentrated in this open-air concentration camp. That will give way for Gazans to go back from the south to the north. It will make it very difficult after that to resume war. Nevertheless, there has to be total withdrawal for this plan to make it permanent.
Sami Al-Arian, thank you so much for the analysis.